each day. And there are 2 waters that we currently do, and we could sparge if we particularly wanted to. So at this point in time, the type of equipment that we have could go into pretty much any brewery setup anywhere in the Western world. What we know as brewing equipment, that's effectively the bit of kit that we have. Don't know if you want to touch upon anything there, Greg?
Yeah, so the company Pure Weld, they don't actually typically make for distilleries a lot. They are more, they're based in Sheffield, kind of north of England. Their background really is kind of breweries, like old school traditional breweries. But a lot of the equipment that we use in terms of our scale also is brewery equipment as well, because essentially this process, until it goes into the still, it's essentially a mini craft brewery here as well. And then obviously the distillation is like further steps on top of that. So they're really good. We essentially did all the specs for it to be like a distillation style of mash tun. So things like your spacing of the plates and how far apart your rakes are, etc. But yeah, it's really good. It's a good quality bit of kit. It doesn't have any heating or anything in it, so it's all just residual heat from our hot water. But it's really sturdy, and it's good quality.
Yeah. So the mash tun is supported by 3 hot liquor tanks that are immediately behind it. These are the kind of insulated units that run along the left-hand side. We'll get you a little bit closer when we go around the corner. But essentially, for those of you that don't know about mashing and how important it is, that is the point that we turn potential alcohol by getting the fermentable sugars extracted from whatever base input that we have. So in this case, it's the malt. By getting it to the exact right temperature, by putting it in the exact amount of water, we're effectively able to extract that fermentable sugar, and essentially the process is separating that, the kind of wheat from the chaff sort of analogy that we have there. After that point, what we don't have is there's no alcohol, it's just potential, it's just fermentable sugars. Then what Dylan will do is actually allocate the particular wash into one of our 6 different fermentation vats that we have on the right hand side. As I said, we name pretty much everything in here. Our stills are named after grandmothers, which means that the vats have to be named after our grandfathers. So it starts here with Alexander, William, Angus, Duncan, Alexander, and there's one... Dana is the other one. Now you'll notice there is 2 different styles. So this is a German or European style vat. This was brand new. We have these custom made because at the time, that's the quantum, that's the amount of product that we had to produce on any given day. That, as you can see here, about 1,200 bulk litres. So we will comfortably fill one of these every single time that we do a mash. The only problem is, when you're doing fermentation and when fermentation is going well, you almost need to leave a little bit of gap, and that's because of vigorous fermentation and the bubbling, and effectively the yeast doing its job. So we realised pretty quickly that this works for smaller quantities, but we needed to go even bigger. So that's the reason that we have these rather large ones at the back, which are Scottish traditional style fermentation vats. And this is where our credentials really stretch around about sustainability. Every single one of those came from the Johnny Walker plant down in Kilmarnock when it closed back in 2015. They were about 6,500 litres each. Today they hold about 1,800 to 2,000 litres each. So when wood or copper or stainless steel in our industry reaches beyond the end of its useful life for a particular purveyor, it doesn't mean that it cannot be turned into something useful for us. And we tend to find that with oak or Oregon pine. You can always reprofile it to make it slightly smaller, or indeed you can reuse the metallics to turn it into something that's still useful for our size that we have here. When we've added the wash that's going to go into each of these after the mashing has been done, we're then going to add Kveik yeast, and this is really kind of the secret sauce. This is really where we're adding our own stamp and uniqueness within the industry. Kveik is a fantastic strain of yeast. I think we've said to some of you guys on the phone already, it finds its origins, its heartlands in the middle of Norway. For those of you, I'm sure you're very aware of Norway, but the temperature conditions are even colder than us most of the time. And what that means is when we do get the temperature variations like today's a really good example. Scotland is not traditionally known for its heat and sunny basking in the sun or anything like that. But equally, this part of the world is not particularly known for vast, dark, cold winters with 3 to 4 inches of snow. we have a variation that's relatively consistent across each of our 4 seasons. By using Kveik can work in any environment that we have possible, which means it's always going to work, it's always going to be efficient. And the way I think of yeast is kind of like small children. If they're fed, if they're watered, and if they're put to bed nicely, in general, they shouldn't cry. Now, that's what we want with our yeast. So essentially, as long as they're happy and they're cosy, they're well fed and they're well slept and rested, they're going to, as soon as they're awake, they're going to run around and they're going to work out and to the nth degree. And that's exactly what we have here in terms of our fermentation. We leave our fermentations quite long, so in general, 7 days, anywhere up to 10. That is where our flavour differential comes in. The vast majority of whiskies that you guys will enjoy probably have a fermentation time between 3 and 5 days. There's nothing wrong with that, it's just it's pretty efficient and they've extracted the alcohol potential, that's what they want. We want the alcohol, yes, nobody's discounting the fact that we want the alcohol, but we want as much of that flavour that's been produced by the yeast as we possibly can, and to that end, that's the reason that we have to wait a little bit longer to do that. You'll also notice that these are partially open-top fermentation units. So some distilleries almost look like an industrial kitchen, stainless steel everywhere, they're pressurised, they control it within an inch of its life. We can't do that because we don't have the equipment to do it, but I don't think we would want to either, because some of that natural bacteria that we have that's unique to us, that's unique to this part of the world, helps influence the flavours that we actually have in Dalquag. Once this is rested for between 7 and 10 days, we really have a very, very strong beer. That's pretty much effectively what we have without it being carbonated. But me and Alex and our sales team, we don't sell beer. We sell whiskey. So that's when we go into the next step. And I'm delighted to say that next step is talking around about our wash distillation, which leads very neatly into you guys filling your casks. Anybody got any questions? On to the casks. Excellent. Thanks, Dylan. You can turn that stuff back on.
No worries.
Cheers.